Hey, it's Andrew here at BTO Range in Conroe, Texas. Again, today we have on the table uh, not necessarily rare, but certainly uncommon little rifle. This is a Sako, S-A-K-O. A lot of people say Sako. The correct pronunciation is Sako, but I mean, you say Sako, everybody knows what you're talking about anyway. This is a Sako Magnum Mauser rifle. Chambered for 375 H&H Magnum. Now this gun is a 1950s commercial gun from Sako. And at the time, Sako did not have a long action of their own. So they were buying Mauser actions, commercial Mauser actions from FN and producing the rifle. And this is one of those. But let's talk a little bit about Sako, the company, and then we'll get back into this rifle. It really started, Sako did, in 1919. So as far as gun companies go, it's relatively young compared to even some American companies, and it's certainly young compared to Beretta, but I think everything is young compared to Beretta. But 1919 they started, and they started out as a repair shop, and they were repairing and refurbishing Russian rifles. I remember they're in Finland, right? So they were repairing Russian rifles, typically Mosin-Nagant pattern rifles. And then in 1921, they became an independent company and really started manufacturing and started making some new models in the Mosin-Nagant pattern in 1921. So they were buying barrels from Switzerland and Germany and installing them on Russian receivers, and then eventually they started making receivers themselves and making the entire gun, and again in the Mosin-Nagant pattern. The Finnish Mosin-Nagants are Sako manufacturers. So in 1927 they moved to Riihimäki, where they still are today in Finland, and began making the Model 28 or the M28 version of the Mosin-Nagant, and they started making ammunition, which was a big thing for Sako. They were at one point the largest manufacturer in Finland of ammunition, may still be, and that continued on through the 1930s. There was a big military buildup in Finland, throughout Europe, obviously, and Sako was part of that. And they were producing rifles and ammunition for just about everything the Finnish Army and the Finnish Civil Guard would field during those conflicts. So at one point after the war, at the end of the war, the Finnish Civil Guard was going to be, they were protected to a degree. There's a governmental change. There was more Eastern Bloc stuff going on in Finland at the time. The Civil Guard became not that much, they were still protected, but they were certainly downplayed, and things were looking bad for Sako. But they were actually purchased, or a controlling interest in Sako was purchased by, of all people, the Red Cross, the Finnish Red Cross. And they began making things like tools and small parts for other industries and textile machines, and that was kind of what was seeing them through. But they started back in the gun business about 1946. They developed, or they brought their short action, the L46 action, which was kind of known as the Riihimäki action, chambered for things like .222 and certain calibers like that. So in the 50s, they needed a long action gun, and they were looking at the American market for commercial sales, because then, as now, it is still one of the largest commercial markets, if not the largest commercial market in the world for firearms. But they did not have a long action. They didn't have an action for those cartridges. So they turned to FN. They were getting the commercial Mauser actions from FN, and they were barreling them and stocking them and otherwise building them out and selling them in the States. And the importer typically, there may have been some Galef importation, and there was certainly Firearms International importation out of Washington, D.C., depending on when. This should be a Galef gun. I haven't pulled it out of the stock yet. There may be an importer mark underneath the wood line on the bottom of this barrel. I just don't know yet. We're shooting this on a Monday, and the guys bought it yesterday on Sunday. So I kind of evaluated it just from talking on the phone to the shift manager and getting some cell phone pictures yesterday. So we bought it, and here it is. I haven't had it out of the wood or anything. So the L46 action, and then they were using this action as their long action gun. It was available in the United States, 270 and 30-06 is what you see it the most in. It was also available as the Magnum Mauser, this gun, in 300 H&H Magnum and 375 H&H Magnum. This is the 375. So that's the least common caliber of this gun in the U.S., and so that's a good thing. It was available also in various metric calibers. It wasn't really imported into the United States, the metric calibers, but 9.3 by 62. And a lot of those European metric calibers, the gun was sold certainly on the continent in those calibers. So, I mean, it's not a typically, or it's not a rare gun. Some are rarer than others, but it's certainly uncommon for these 50s Sakos. So this action went away. Now, when were these guns made? It depends on what source you read. Most people attribute these guns from 1951 or 52 to 1957. There is some correspondence from Sako that indicate they may have been made as late as 1960. They developed the L461 action, which became known as the Finbear, the L61R action. And it was introduced in 1961 in all the long action calibers and the Magnum calibers and whatnot in the Sako. And they still had some of these actions left over. They didn't toss them, obviously. They continued to build the rifles till the actions were used up. So that said, I think we can generally say 57, 58 is when these started to no longer be produced except for stock on hand. I think that's probably a pretty safe bet on this rifle. So continuing with Sako, after that, we see in the 70s and 80s, we see the mixing in of the Valmet company, and Tikka begins, and then obviously around 1999 or so, Beretta obtained the largest shares in the company, and it's now Sako, or Sako, is now one of the Beretta family of companies as it is today. And we have new Sakos on the wall at the shop. But to me, the older Sakos, and this is me personally, the older Sakos have a place in my heart, particularly deluxe version Sakos. And this is a standard grade. We'll talk about the difference in a minute, and we'll put up some pictures of some deluxe grade guns. So let's look at this one. This is a standard grade Sako Magnum Mauser in 375 H&H. So we have a traditional, and we're clear here, bolts open, nothing's in there. Traditional Mauser M98 action. We have the bolt stop here, just as you would on any M98. Remove the bolt. We have a true controlled round feed, straight up 98 Mauser action. There's nothing different or new or innovative there. We have the 3-position wing safety. Now, this is an earlier gun. We know it's an earlier gun for a couple of reasons. One is that wing safety. They would go to a different style safety later on in the production of this rifle, more commercialized, if you will, and this sight. The later guns have a 2-leaf folding express style sight. They still have this ramped hooded front sight on the front, but this is very similar to what you would see on a military 98 Mauser. Now, it is missing the slider. There would be a slider that runs along through here that makes the sight lift up and down at these yardage ranges. So there would be a slider that you would move to lift this up, and that slider is missing. So that's one issue with this particular rifle. It's not a huge issue because I think I can find that part and put it on there. So I mean, that's not a huge deal. The gun is drilled and tapped from the factory for the traditional 98 Mauser or Olympian Mauser scope bases. So and in true Sako marking tradition, we have the Sako name here on the left side of the barrel. The serial number on this gun is on the left side of the barrel. It is not on the receiver. That is very much a European thing. In Europe, typically you will see the barrels, not necessarily the receivers. or both. You may see, you will almost always see the barrel serialized. And at the time this gun was brought in, the importer markings weren't required as they are now. So as far as all of the minutia that ATF requires now for an importer. So that's why there's no markings on the receiver itself on this particular rifle. It is Sako marked there. Caliber's marked on the top of the barrel right forward of the receiver. So that's how this particular gun is marked. And again, I don't have it, I haven't had it out of the stock, so I don't know if there's an importer mark underneath that or not. Typically, Firearms International would put their mark on the gun somewhere. Galef typically did not. Sometimes they did, but typically did not. So we shall see. But we do know from correspondence, email correspondence from Sako over the years to various people, that the serial numbers on these guns started at about 100,000. So this gun is serial number 109,000 and change, 109 and change. So it's fairly comfortable that this is probably a second-year gun-ish. So if you want to say 52 is when they started with it, then 54 is probably as close to an educated guess. Now, occasionally we've been able to email Sako in Finland and get information on specifics of when the gun or when guns were made. Sometimes they just don't answer at all. So I mean, it's a crapshoot. I'm going to try it and see what I get. And if I do get something back, I'll update it in the comments on this video. But again, it may not. I certainly can't make any promises. So what would this be used for? I mean, we're in Southeast Texas, so a 375 H&H has, there's not a lot of reason to hunt a 375 H&H in Southeast Texas. Yes, we have wild boars. No, they're not armor plated, and no, they don't fly. So I don't know that 375 H&H is necessary for those. But in the event that you're going to, it's perfectly capable of moose or brown bear or just anything on this continent for sure, as well as most game anywhere in the world. So it's a big gun. So how would we evaluate this particular rifle? Well, it's the same thing we always talk about, right? Originality, scarcity, and condition. So we've talked about scarcity. It's not, it's an uncommon rifle. I wouldn't say it's particularly rare. The 375 H&H, of the Americanized calibers, the 375 H&H is probably the rarer of the bunch during importation. If this gun were one of the oddball metric calibers and it was an individual importation from Europe somewhere, that might increase the value somewhat to a collector, but not to a shooter. So we have two different types of value that we can talk about with this gun. Its value as a collectible Sako rifle, or its value as a guy that wants a shooter 375 H&H. So let's talk about that. So the scarcity of the gun we talked about. Let's look at the originality of the gun. The stock is absolutely original. It's a standard grade stock. The deluxe model is typically lighter in color with a basket weave type checkering, and we'll put up some pictures of that so you can compare them. This pad is not, it's an older pad because it's kind of stiffened up as they do, but this is a later Pottmeyer pad that's on this gun. So they came with a pad originally, but this pad's been changed out at some point, and it could probably be changed again. I personally, for a 375 H&H, before I actually shot this gun on the bench, I would want a different pad for sure. We talked about this slider being missing here. That's relatively minor. And someone at some point has threaded and put this muzzle brake on the muzzle. It did not come that way from the factory. It just came with a regular crowned muzzle, so that's added. So when I evaluated the gun, and again, I was looking at cell phone pictures and talking to one of my guys that didn't really know a whole ton about Sako, old Sako rifles. I saw that, so that did affect my purchase price on this gun a little bit, but not terribly so, because it does increase the usability of the gun for somebody that's wanting a 375 H&H that's actually going to shoot it and hunt it. So, and that brings us to the collector versus hunter value question. So from a collector standpoint, it is still an interesting rifle because it is a relatively uncommon pre-L61 or pre-461 action Sako rifle in an uncommon caliber 375 H&H Magnum. So that said, for a collector that wanted to fill that hole in his Sako collection, it would be a good purchase if he could get it right, so that he will fill that hole in the collection and then upgrade it if he found a nicer unit without the muzzle brake, or with a better pad, or that had the two-leaf, maybe it has the two-leaf express sight instead of this slider style rear sight. So that said, these guns without the brake, with the two-leaf sight instead of this slider sight, typically run, or can be typically found in that $1,000 range, sometimes a little bit more. And then certain things can make it a little bit less valuable, such as that brake install, or that kind of crunchy pad back here. But that said, they're still very solid rifles. They're still going to be close to that $1,000 mark when you find them, depending on condition. So the condition of this gun, and I've really never seen one in bad condition, because the people that had these guns normally would take care of them. So this gun obviously had a scope on it at one point. That's missing. You know, there's no plug screw. Well, there's 3 holes in one plug screw. So it had a scope on it at one point, and that's neither here nor there. But the checkering, I mean, it hasn't been recut, hasn't been filled in, so we're confident that there hasn't been any finish added to this stock. The bluing is still the original bluing as it was. This is still in the white as it should be. The bolt hasn't been messed with or jacked with. This is the Sako trigger. Sako did design their own trigger for the Mauser, and it came in these rifles. That hasn't been changed to a Timney or anything like that. So that's all good. We're comfortable with the originality of the rifle, except for the modifications already mentioned, like the muzzle brake. So originality is good, scarcity is moderate, and condition is on the better side of average for this rifle. So this would be a great rifle for somebody that wants a 375 H&H, or gosh, I'm thinking about buying it myself, to be honest with you. And I have zero need for a 375 H&H, but to me, it's just a cool walnut and steel rifle from the 50s that I don't know, it's kind of a, I don't want to really say upscale, but to me, again, this is a personal thing. I like it better than the Weatherby style rifle. It just seems more classic to me. So this is one of those finds that it pays to pay attention to your used gun rack at your local gun shop, because it is very possible that they may not know what it is, and they may have it undervalued. Now, the other possibility is they'll see that word Sako on it, and then they'll confuse that with one of the later rifles. Now, the 461 action, the 61R action guns typically bring more than this rifle on the used market. So you just have to kind of see where that's going. Now, I did want to mention a couple other things. This is the older style floor plate release. This is a push button right here. The later style had the more commercial Mauser style hinged floor plate release right here. This floor plate actually will completely, well, I say that. This button, now it's gonna become something that I just need to make happen. This entire floor plate assembly will come out of this. There it comes. You have to kind of push it back. There's a little lip right here that fits onto a tab right here that holds the front of that end. But the entire floor, it's not hinged. That's where I'm going. The entire floor plate comes out. So it can be unloaded that way. It's a bit cumbersome to do it. I don't know that a whole lot of people did that in the field specifically, but there it is. But the other thing to remember, though, or the other thing to think about is This gun is very similar to the Browning version. Browning had a rifle through the late 50s, 60s, and into the 70s that was built on FN commercial Mauser action and simply called the Browning bolt action, the Browning high power sporting rifle. And very similar gun. And in fact, Browning used Sako actions for their short action calibers in that Browning Safari grade, medallion grade, and Olympic grade rifles during that time period as well. So a little interesting side note. So the interesting thing about firearms is there's always, there's always so much cross-pollination that goes on in the gun world, I guess, during this time period. So anyway, neat find. We just picked it up yesterday. This was not my plan to do this particular rifle today, but I don't think it's going to last very long, so I figured we would go ahead and do this one while we had it. So the Sako Magnum Mauser sporting rifle, this is circa 1953-54, chambered for .375 H&H Magnum. If you like what we're doing, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Drop us a comment. We read them, we respond to them. If there's a particular make or model that you would like us to take a look at, we'll do our best. People are asking for Winchester Model 12. Believe me, I love the Model 12s, and we'll do them as soon as we get a good representative example of that model. So we'll certainly try to accommodate if we can get a reasonable example to look at. So if you get the opportunity, check out Big Tech's Ordnance YouTube channel. If you like the more high-speed, low-drag stuff, there's a lot of AR platform stuff and custom high-end tactical parts that they talk about on that channel. So once again, thanks for your support. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll catch you next time.